Welcome back, everyone, to another Friday episode of the College Sports Hive. We got some college basketball to cover for you this weekend. We got two top 20 matchups that we'll preview for you all. But first things first, we'll start off with some news. Then we'll go over some scores from earlier on in the week. We'll give you our what happened with our picks and our top fives and performance of the weeks and things like that on Monday. So you'll have that to look forward to after this weekend's action. And then we'll recap some of the major games that we previewed for you last time, and then as well as include a preview or two for the good matchups this weekend. And then, of course, we'll end things with our picks as always. So to jump in to this basketball episode, we have some news. A marquee matchup in the Big Ten ACC Challenge was canceled, postponed. Michigan State and Virginia. That was one of the big ones that we previewed, and that is not happening due to Virginia positives and tests. And so they actually won't play William Merriam December 13th either. So they've paused all activities. What do we know from there in the UVA camp?
Yeah, just kind of what you said there, that they're not really releasing anything, who was positive, whether it was a player, a staffer, or who knows. And everything's paused right now. They're trying to get back and be able to play before playing Villanova December 19th is the goal, but who knows at this point, as obviously all things are kind of volatile.
Absolutely. We had another postponement of NC State and Michigan. That was another game in the ACC Big Ten Challenge that was postponed. Houston has paused their program's actions due to COVID issues as well in their basketball program. Houston's a team that Leif and I are both very high on so far this year with their performances. We think they're a very legitimate contender. They will not. They have to pause their basketball operations there. And then let me get your thoughts on this. A Division II Fort Hays State beat Kansas State handily. What do you make of that?
Well, I'm surprised they were beaten handily, but Kansas State is awful. I watched them play Drake and lose at the beginning of the year, and then I watched their second half versus a Colorado team that's solid, but should not have beaten them by 20 and a half. So prop to Fort Hays State, D2 school, and they came into Manhattan, Kansas, and beat them by 13. So I don't know what's going on for the Wildcats over there, but I'd hope they can turn it around and be somewhat competitive in a seemingly stacked Big 12.
For sure. Another cancellation is DePaul and Villanova. That game will not happen due to COVID issues as well. And then the UCLA program has just signed a new deal with Jordan. What do you make of that move for them?
I was wondering who they'd sign with, because it's just such a marquee brand name, especially with the basketball history that they've got. And then obviously their football program's nothing to sneeze at. So I'm happy to see them get a marquee program, and I wonder exactly what brand they'll be wearing for when they play Marquette. That'll be interesting to see, because they've been letting their players wear whatever shoe while they were brandless. They're free agents of sorts.
Interesting stuff there for sure, in terms of brand deals and things like that, and how that all plays into college basketball. As of right now, the Big Ten is killing the ACC in the Big Ten ACC Challenge. What do you make of the ACC's performance so far at some of these games?
Yeah, it felt like the ACC top teams were destroyed by the Big Ten's top teams, and then the ACC kind of eked their way back into it, but the Big Ten won. The top of the Big Ten we all saw was going to be really good, and then we're seeing some improved depth too, as there are some teams in the middle of each conference that were handily beaten. For instance, Penn State absolutely destroyed a ranked Virginia Tech team. And so you just see the depth of the Big Ten, which we kind of all expected, and then the ACC looks a little weaker than we anticipated, or at least I anticipated.
Some other teams that have some question marks moving forward in the early part of the season. Kentucky, we touched on, started off at 1-3, and Duke is now 2-2 after their second straight loss to Illinois over the weekend. What do we make of these programs in the standpoint that they're in right now?
Yeah, it's bizarre seeing these two powerhouses, just the blue chips, the blue bloods of the blue bloods, really struggling on the basketball court. And then Duke made even more of a splash recently. They decided to cancel their last three pre-conference play games in order to allow their kids to see their families and not play in a time where rates are spiking. There's definitely some controversy. Nate Oates, the coach of Alabama, called out Coach K, saying that he wouldn't have done this had they not just been beaten twice on their home floor. But I don't know. It's something that's certainly something. I'm not exactly sure what to think of it.
Yeah, it's interesting to see kind of how these teams have started their year and kind of the scrutiny that they've been under so far in the beginning of the season. Some scores to go through for all of you that have happened so far this week. Tennessee beat Colorado fairly handily by 7, 56-49. You touched on that Penn State upset over number 15, Virginia Tech. They beat Virginia Tech 75-55. So by 20 points, a big win there for the Big Ten. Any comment on that one?
Uh, they're playing really well. I'm a little surprised, and I did think that Virginia Tech was too highly rated just because of one upset. So I wasn't stunned about the result of the game necessarily, but to lose by 20 was surprising.
Yeah, Purdue, on the other hand, blew a 20-point lead to Miami in that game as well, and then Ohio State was able to edge out Notre Dame 90-85. So those are some of the games that we have there. Also, we have some of the games that we previewed for you all. The 3 out of the 4 that happened. Kansas eked out a 1-point win over Creighton. Iowa was able to beat North Carolina by 13 by a score of 93-80, which was very high scoring, and Iowa looks very legit. That Leif and I have both touched on that. And then Illinois and laid the wood kind of on Duke in this one, beating them 83-68. So some pretty impressive performances from the powerhouses of the Big Ten, as well as Kansas eking their way out to another really big win for that program early on in the year. Let's start there with that Kansas Creighton win and recap that game a little bit. Like I touched on, final score was 73-72 in favor of Kansas. What kind of made the difference in this one, and how did that kind of end play out in a way?
Yeah, no, I think what made the difference was Kansas out-rebounded Creighton, had more assists than Creighton, and had fewer turnovers, as well as shot the ball from 3 better than Creighton, which you would assume, especially against a Creighton team that's so dependent on the 3, you would assume that results in a blowout, and yet it was a 1-point win. Kansas could have won more comfortably had they taken care of the ball at the end of the game. They were up 5 and let up a wide-open 3 on a miscommunication, and then followed up with a turnover leading to a dunk, tying the game up. Bill Self calls up a timeout. Beautiful play. Jalen Wilson hits a 3 to put them up, and then makes a silly error, sending Marcus Zagorowski to the free throw line. Zagorowski hits the first 2 and misses the third. It was a really wild end to a game that was pretty well played for the most part. But based off all the statistics, you'd say that Kansas should have been dominant and in control. But what was interesting to me is Ochai Agbaji, who entered this game as their leading scorer, didn't score. And Jalen Wilson put that team on his back and scored 23, had 23 points, 10 rebounds, and some clutch plays on the defensive end as well. I wonder if he's the man for them. I mean, they have Marcus Garrett, they have David McCormick, Christian Brown. They got talent, and we talk about how they're lacking a blue chip recruit like they typically have, but he's developing as a real NCAA force, and you don't need to be a blue chip to be that.
They're 5-1 on the year, correct?
Yeah, and their only loss is to Gonzaga.
Right. So this is still a program that's, even though we've talked about them with their scandal and they're a little bit more deprived on talent and things like that, the recruiting classes are going down in rating each and every year in the last few years. But this is a team that's still eked past a few really good basketball programs and managed to win the game late. I know you can't foul that 3-point shooter and give them 3 freebies at the line. Back iron foul shot basically secured them the win there in that game. But with that being said, I do think there's something to hold their hat on as Kansas to say, hey, we could be 3-2, we could be 2-3, but here we are sitting at 5-1, and we're going to be in the top 10 of the rankings.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for we have a pedigree, and we're still winning the games that our pedigree says. Like, we're seeing Duke and Kentucky. If you were to think of the other 2 blue bloods of recent years, that's Kansas and North Carolina. And Kansas is performing the best of those 4 teams, and they have the least talent. So I think that says a lot about Bill Self's coaching. And then some of these guys are veteran players, and they're stepping up into new roles, but they've been playing college basketball. And I think that shows in terms of the performances and able to come up with big wins, even not playing their best basketball, which I don't think they've done yet. So props to Kansas. And again, of course, they'll be a force in the Big 12. I think they won 16 of 17. So yeah, watch out for Kansas as usual in the Big 12.
Absolutely. Let's flip the script a little bit and talk about Creighton. What did you make of them in this performance, and what do they need to do a little bit more of to be on top? I know they struggled shooting the three, but is that just their make and break method? If they don't shoot well, they're not going to succeed?
Honestly, I was impressed that they were able to stay in this game considering they didn't shoot well. I thought that in order to win this game for Creighton or be within 1 point as they were, they would have to be shooting the ball really well against a pretty good defensive Kansas team. So I was impressed with their ability to scrap, and then they played really well in transition. I think that kept them in the game. They pushed the ball, hit some open threes in transition, got some layups. And then I think Creighton's defense is better than it has been in past years. That's always been a flaw of Coach McDermott's teams, but they at least made some looks really difficult for Kansas, and as a small ball team made David McCormick as a big uncomfortable. And they were able to keep this game close on the defensive end, and that's something that Creighton teams typically aren't able to say. And I think that bodes well for them, especially going into the Big East, where Villanova doesn't look unbeatable. They just eked by Georgetown, and I just think that that they can play with anyone. I don't know if they'll beat everyone, but they can play with anyone.
Where would you rank Creighton?
I think about like 10 to 12. I have to see a little more because this is their first game against a ranked opponent, and they were outplayed in things they do well, and they were still close. And in some ways, I think that's really good. And in some ways, I think, oh, well, they didn't play that well. That means like Kansas didn't. So I think I just need one more ranked opponent for them. But I think they're in the 10 to 15, 10 to 12 range for me. So certainly legitimate contenders in the Big East, and that can make a splash nationally as well.
I would agree with that for sure. Any other final thoughts about this game, Kansas and Creighton?
No, I think we covered it, and I think that it'll be really interesting to see how Kansas progresses based off all these close games to see if they've kind of reached their ceiling or close to it, or if they're still going to develop and get better as these guys become more familiar with their roles, or if they're because they're veterans and other teams are younger that other teams catch up to them. So I think that's something to watch for.
All right, there it is. That's Kansas beating Creighton 73-72 in a classic there in the Big East Big 12 Challenge. I don't know if that's a thing, but we called it as it was on the show. So a great one there to recap for you. Another one that happened. We were talking about how Iowa needed to kind of prove some legitimacy in their season so far this year. Yes, they're number 3 in the country, but who had they beaten? They kind of flipped the script on that one this week when they played North Carolina, beating them by a tune of 93-80. We said if Iowa shot well to help out Luka Garza that they'd have a great chance to win. They made 17 threes as a team. So I think they did a little bit more than that.
Yeah, I mean, they were phenomenal. That first half, I mean, even the first half of the first half, so a quarter, if you will, Iowa looked like the best team in the country for that period. They hit Luka Garza played a bad first half. He was 2 of 10 in the first half. If you tell the teams last year, oh my God, Luka Garza was 2 of 10, without the help that they have, some of the guys weren't there this year. They'd be like, oh, we're beating Iowa by 30 because they're not very good defensively typically. And then you got Joe Wieskamp. Jordan Bohannon's back. He's a fifth-year senior returning from a hip injury. He had 24 points, a steadying presence, hit 7 threes, 6 assists, and then C.J. Frederick and Joe Wieskamp both hit 5 threes. And so that's their 17 threes right there, and all of them play at the same time as Luka Garza. So it's pick your poison. They're going to be electric offensively all the time. I love it, and honestly, I think that I was better when Luka Garza isn't the one beating you. Because he's always going to have the presence. Everyone's always going to be like, well, we can't let Garza get super low in the post. So if the other teams are other players are leading them in scoring, that bodes really well for the Hawkeyes, and they're a legitimate contender if this continues.
Yeah, we said Garza was struggling, but he still finished with 16 points, 14 rebounds, and 4 blocks. So that's still a very good performance from him there in this one. And what did you make of the bench from Iowa in this game?
Yeah, that was also huge. They lacked length last year. They had Garza, and that was it. And now they added Patrick McCaffrey, son of the coach. He's 6'9", long. And then they have Jack Nungy came back from an ACL injury, skilled big man, and Keegan Murray. And all three of them contributed in this game, especially against a team like North Carolina, where they're going to rebound like crazy. And so you play the small ball that Iowa typically does, you're in trouble. And those guys provided bodies that were capable of boxing out the bigs of North Carolina and stay close on the glass, provide extra possessions with hustle. And it was enormous. And then just in general, not necessarily against Carolina, you have added depth that's a luxury that you didn't have. Luka Garza doesn't have to play 37 minutes and be huffing and puffing. And that just makes Iowa all the much more better. And I was extremely impressed. That was the most impressive performance of any of these three games that we're talking about here, from those the marquee matchups of the Big Ten ACC.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think they really proved that they're a legitimate contender, very much deserving of that top three ranking in so far this season. Let's flip the script and talk about North Carolina a little bit, though. What did you make of them in this game? And they still scored 80 points, because you touched on maybe Iowa struggles a little bit on the defensive end, so North Carolina was still able to create offense and not necessarily be blown out in this game by giving up 93 points. But what do you make of that North Carolina team moving forward?
Yeah, I think this North Carolina team faces similar issues that they did last year in an all-time low season. They're a lot better. They have more depth and more space on the floor. They're lacking shooting. They don't shoot the ball very well. They actually shot great in this game, and that's why they were able to stay in it. But in general, they don't have a threat of shooting, so it clogs the paint for their plethora of bigs. I mean, Garrison Brooks was the ACC preseason player of the year. But it's hard for him to go against guys, especially like Luka Garza, and then other guys in the ACC. It'll be difficult for him when they play two bigs like Armando Bacot and Day'Ron Sharp, when Caleb Love and RJ Davis are your best two shooters as freshmen, who are already, you seeing, are streaky, inconsistent shooters that are more slashers. So I think they need to play even faster than they typically play, which is going to be hard. Or they need to find someone who's going to light the nets on fire, because Leaky Black is that three doesn't seem to do it. He's a really good versatile player, but he's not a 3-point sniper.
For sure. That was Iowa and North Carolina in this one. Iowa winning by a tune of 93-80 in this Big Ten ACC matchup. That was another fun one to watch for sure. And then the one to close out our recaps for you here is Illinois and Duke. Illinois was able to beat Duke for the second time for a Big Ten school going into Cameron Indoor, and beat Duke by a score of 83-68. So pretty convincingly as well. So I think that's kind of why you saw some of those comments come out about that Duke shutdown of not playing any more non-conference games. So I think maybe some people have some grounds to stand on there, but once again, I'm not going to question Mike Krzyzewski and what he's doing there at Duke. I know 2-2 is not what he wants to see, but I'm not necessarily sure he's really scared of playing anyone, if that's what they're trying to insinuate by those comments. What did you make of first off Duke in this one, and then we'll flip it and talk about Illinois?
I thought Duke was really bad on offense. I think they were really stagnant, and Illinois came up with a good game plan of defending Jalen Johnson, and if you can stop him from being dynamic and explosive, that takes away almost all of what Duke intends to do. They showed flashes from a freshman other than Jalen Johnson, and Jeremy Roach. He had a nice game of 13 and 7, but Illinois was firmly in front the entire game, and Duke never seemed to make a surge. I don't think they cut it under 10 points at really any point in this game after the 10 points was established. And that's something that I mean, I understand Illinois is a really good team, but if you have the talent you have and the athleticism and depth of Duke, you have to be able to have a surge to push it, maybe even get it to 6. And if it comes back up to 12, that's something. But it just stayed at 10 and moved up all the way up to 19 at times. Their offense was super stagnant. Their pick and roll seemed non-existent. Matthew Hurt, they ran a few nice actions, but he was missing shots. And, that happens. And then there was a no-show. We talked about Wendell Moore having to play well. He scored 0 points. So I think they've got some legitimate issues to try to solve before the ACC season. And I wonder if that is something that Coach K wants to do and build confidence through practice. And there's an ulterior motive that he's not saying as much so, just because their offense looks extremely stagnant in my eyes.
Yeah, let's flip the script and talk about Illinois. They had they had where did it go? 6 players with 10 or more points in this game. So some contribution from all aspects of things. I had Sumo had another really good game. He's one of the best players in the country, in my opinion. What do you make of this Illinois team? I know they struggled with Baylor, but what do you think the ceiling is, and what stood out to you in this performance?
I think that was just a testament to Baylor that they struggle with Baylor. I think Baylor is extremely good, and Illinois is a top 5 caliber team in my eyes. In this game, though Duke isn't where they probably will be at the end, they pose the talent to threaten the team. And Illinois showed, hey, we're tough, we're good defensively, and we can put up points on you. They scored 83 points on a Duke team that I'm sure will be good defensively. Their rotations are already good, and they're freaky athletic. So if they're going to put up 83 on that type of team and battle Baylor beforehand and look like, oh, that's their shortcoming, I think that's just Baylor. Illinois was able to establish Kofi Coburn in this game. They got contributions from shooters other than DeSumo. They looked really good, and I think as their contributions from Andre Corbello, the backup point guard, as he plays more, gets more, sinks his feet more into college basketball, and as with Adam Miller, those two guys, like if they can grow and become really good players for in the Big Ten, Illinois has a legitimate chance of making the Final Four.
Yeah, they looked impressive in this one for sure, beating Duke by a total of 83-68. Sorry, excuse me. In there, it's the second straight Big Ten win in Cameron Indoor Stadium. Something to take into account for sure in that one. With that being said, that's going to do it for our recaps. In this one, we're going to move on to some previews of games that are going to happen this weekend. Starting off with number 13 Texas, who we're both very high on so far this year, traveling to number 2 Baylor. Very tough test for this Texas team, but they're super athletic, super long, super lengthy. What do we make of this matchup between these two schools?
I think these are two of the better teams in the landscape of college basketball, and I know that's general because it's 2 versus 13, but I think that might even be like lowballing how good these two teams are. Baylor, just for some geeky statistics, if anyone's really a fan of that, Baylor is first overall in KenPom. They're the only team in both the top 10 for both offense and defense. They're third in offensive adjusted efficiency and fifth in defensive adjusted efficiency. And then Texas is fourth overall, so you got the first and fourth according to this metric. They're 20th in offense and second defensively. So you're not going to find a lot of teams that are better defensively than Baylor, and Texas potentially is one. And so far in the season, according to this metric, they are. So this is going to be a really good matchup of two defenses that are elite and get it done completely differently. You talked about the length of Texas, whereas Baylor, they just pressure you into oblivion, and you can't drive because they force you away from the middle and make you beat them from the outside, which is not exactly Texas's strong suit in my eyes. But they do have the playmakers like in Matt Coleman and Courtney Ramey to do so.
Right. Yeah, absolutely, for sure. What do you think is going to be the indicating factor if Texas can compete in this game? Do you think it's going to be on the defensive side of the ball, or do you think it's going to be on the offensive side?
I think it has to be offensively for Texas, because I think that Baylor's got the shooters that can beat that won't be as influenced by the shot blocking of Texas and the pressure. I think they pass it and move it. Like Illinois was kind of a similar test, and I think they passed that with flying colors. And as for Texas, I think that they need to find a way to penetrate and use the speed of Matt Coleman, kick out to shooters, get his bigs involved against the smaller Baylor. The smaller Baylor team, but I think they really need to be able to hit some threes in this game, and that's been a shortcoming for Texas so far in this year. And teams that have made them put the ball on the floor for guys like Kai Jones and Greg Brown, who are both phenomenal athletes that are huge and really ranging fast, they struggle at putting the ball on the floor against smaller defenders, and that's what Baylor presents. So it's a unique challenge that I don't think Texas will struggle with too often, but Baylor is a unique team.
How do you rate their chances of getting to the basket in this one? Because I think when you look at Texas and you break down their offensive schemes, you're not really going to look for three-point shooting efficiency in this game. When I watch Texas, I expect them to be able to beat people off the bounce, score inside, and offensive rebound, get offensive rebounds, and be able to score in that way. But also when I saw Texas for the first time, they were just beating people to the hoop and being able to have uncontested layups, finishing tough layups if they had to. And that's what kind of hooked me in and became the more impressive factor for me, is they're able to just bully you in that facet of things. you touched on Baylor doesn't really let you do that. How do you rate their chances of being able to do that in this one?
Yeah, no, that's the battle is can the guards of Texas and even the bigger guys of Texas use either their speed or their size to penetrate against Baylor's what seems at this point impenetrable defense. And I think they'll have times of just superior athleticism winning out. Like Greg Brown is a specimen, and I think at times when he's guarded by a 6'4" guard, he's going to be able to exploit that. But I think just the team dynamic and the experience Baylor has together on the defensive side of the ball and the speed they have will overall thwart Texas. That's why I think Baylor's going to win. I think their defense is just better than Texas's offense. And I think that's what the game comes down to, because Texas, they're going to be good defensively, but Baylor, I trust their production because they have 4 experienced guards, whereas Texas kind of needs a big game from Matt Coleman every time, and then they need one of the big guys to play really well. And I don't know if they're going to be able to establish an inside presence, but they very well could. They have the athletes to do so for sure.
Absolutely, they definitely have the athletes. What do you make of this game for Baylor? We touched on how we're going to try and slow down the pace against Gonzaga and not necessarily play as fast and try and push the ball up and down the floor in that one. Do you think they kind of stick to the same script here? Because I think Texas is going to be one of the teams that wants to run as well and be able to play that style of game. Do you think they try and slow it down again, or not again because that Gonzaga game didn't happen, or do you think they are going to kind of go with this fast-paced game and have this be a game that just goes up and down the floor?
I think they play faster against Texas than they would have against Gonzaga, just because Gonzaga is super efficient offensively, whereas Texas is more efficient defensively. I think that they'll try to get those points in fast break that they can get against Texas, because Texas makes some turnovers. But I think that right there lies the key to the game. I think the key is don't let Texas get turnovers for touchdowns, as I like to call them. Don't let them steal the ball and throw an alley-oop to Greg Brown or Kai Jones and get a ton of momentum and play like super energized. I think they need to limit those type of turnovers, and they can play fast and try to force turnovers on the other end. They just have to be smarter with the ball and winning the turnover battle against Texas. Teams like Texas and North Carolina, who like to run at all times, is paramount. And then I think that they need to just lock in and say, hey, if Texas beats us from shooting threes, that's one thing. Whereas if they're going to beat us inside, that isn't our DNA. So if I'm Baylor, I say, hey, you beat me from 3, everyone but Courtney Ramey and Matt Coleman, and I'm satisfied. That means you hit me with your best punch. So I think that's kind of the key for Baylor is play to their DNA and don't let Texas get run out dunks.
Right. Do you think there's an issue here with Baylor's lack of size and the athleticism of Texas and the offensive rebounding / defensive rebounding aspect of things?
I think there'll be instances of it where guys get rebounds that just most people don't get. Jericho Sims, Greg Brown, Kai Jones, they'll get some rebounds that are not pretty much inexplicable. But I don't think it'll be a horrible issue for Baylor, because I think Mark Vidal is an absolute beast. He's the ultimate glue guy, ultimate competitor. And then I saw enough from JTT, just his energy, and he's got the athleticism that is comparable to those guys. So I think in that combination, if they have to go big and play both those guys together, that they'll be able to stay close. I expect Texas to win the rebounding battle, but I don't think it'll be disastrous.
Yeah, we got a heck of a game for you here between number 13 Texas and number 2 Baylor. Leif touched on the deeper dive of things. Say they're first overall in some stats and 4th overall in some. So a tremendous matchup here. Any other further thoughts before we move on to our second one?
I think we got it.
Beautiful. All right, our second game that we're going to preview for you all tonight is number 19 Richmond traveling to number 11 West Virginia. We saw this West Virginia team play, and they're kind of a little bit of a similar mold to Texas. But with that being said, what do you make of this Richmond and West Virginia matchup?
I think that it's such a weird game because Richmond plays a style where they have 5 seniors or 4 seniors and 1 sophomore that start. They play slowly, but they also force a lot of turnovers and push the ball. And West Virginia is known to play fast, but because they have 2 bigs, they play slower. So it's 2 teams that, because of their personnel, change the way that they play and operate. And I think it boils down to, does the scheme, the Princeton offense that Richmond runs through Grant Golden, trouble the bigs of West Virginia more, or do the bigs of West Virginia trouble the smaller Richmond Spider team more? Like, and I think it's as simple as that: is who can play cat and mouse better, and the team that does that more effectively should win this game.
What do you make of this Richmond team? They're 4-0 so far on the year. They're ranked number 19. It's probably a program that people see in the top 25 and are just like, who the heck is Richmond? So it's not necessarily one of those blue bloods. West Virginia kind of is that in the basketball realm of things, with good teams year in and year out. But what do you make of this Richmond squad?
I love them. They're one of my favorite teams. I think I said this in the podcast, or at least I said this to you. I was devastated that we didn't have time to pick the Richmond versus Kentucky game because of a couple cancellations. We didn't know what was going to happen. I was going to take Richmond, and that one ended up happening, and that catapulted them into the rankings. But I don't think they were far off anyway. They're veteran laden, and it shows. In a year where there's shortens practices in the off season, you need to have experience, and that's what Richmond has. They have 4 seniors. They have a big man that's an amazing passer named Grant Golden. He scores 15 a game, 7 rebounds, and 4 assists. Look for him to get the ball and take the bigs away from the basket, and there'll be back cuts. It's kind of a staple of the Princeton offense, some off-ball movement and like little flex screens. They're one of my favorite teams to watch offensively. And then defensively, they really troubled the Kentucky team that had young guards, that their guards are really pesky, get up under you. And Jacob Gilliard is the senior point guard. They list him at 5'9". I think that's generous. He looks very small on the court, but he gets after you defensively. He gets a lot of steals, gets his team early buckets. And then they have a couple other players who just play their role beautifully, slash, and then they don't shoot particularly well, which worries me a little bit against a West Virginia team that's got 2 great rim protectors. But this is not a team that you're like 19, they'll be out of here soon. That they're there to stay, in my opinion.
Very interesting indeed to hear that kind of perspective. And I knew you called that Richmond Kentucky upset, and sorry we couldn't get it on the show for you. But here's a prime example for you to see if you can do it again against this West Virginia here in a little bit. Yeah, I know you don't have it necessarily written down on the document yet, so we still have some time to make up our decision here. But no. Yeah, but no, I agree. I think what I've seen so far from Richmond is impressive. It's something that definitely warrants the 19 ranking. But also the same thing could be said about West Virginia. What do you think about this team, and what are their keys to the game going to be? Excuse me if I can get that out. Keys to the game.
Yeah, so West Virginia, just first and foremost, Bob Huggins is a great defensive coach. All of his teams are really good defensively. In fact, just for those analytics people that we may have gotten in earlier, West Virginia is ranked 5th overall, so right behind Texas in terms of just overall efficiency as a basketball team. They're 13th on offense and 11th on defense, so they're an elite team. It's just as simple as that. When you rank 5th overall in terms of those type of analytics, that means you're a really good team. They run through their bigs, as I've mentioned. They have Derek Culver and Oscar Shibwe. Culver's averaging around 15 a game and 11 rebounds, and Oscar Shibwe is honestly probably the better of the two in my opinion. He just is always in foul trouble, but yet he still averages 9 points and 9 rebounds a game. As for West Virginia, the key is always shooting. Is where can they get supplementary scoring aside from those 2 bigs, and then Deuce McBride. His name's actually Miles McBride, but everyone calls him Deuce. He's a defensive dog, and he's able to score points. It's just, for him, it's about efficiency. And then West Virginia, if they could have consistent shooting, would be a national title contender. It's just a question of if Taz Sherman, Sean McNeil, and Emmett Matthews can shoot, and some days they can, and some days they can't. So that's kind of what to look for in this game, in my opinion, is if they can shoot, and then how badly does West Virginia win the rebounding battle. I expect them to win, but it's just can Richmond hang in there on the glass?
It's going to be another tremendous one for you here between number 19 Richmond and number 11 West Virginia. With that being said, it's time for our Elite Eight of the week. We're going to make some picks, and where better to start off with than Utah at BYU in this matchup? Who you got in this one in the holy war between the Utes and Brigham Young, the Cougars? I don't know why I couldn't think of that.
It's an interesting one. So the BYU, what's funny is Utah won last year against BYU, and BYU was a far better basketball team. They lost Yoli Childs, TJ Haws, and Jake Toolson. So their three best players are gone, as well as other pieces. And they're still a good team. And Utah is young in their season. They've played only a few games. They beat Washington. They beat Idaho State. I'm going to go with Utah, actually. And I love the way BYU plays. But I just don't think they have the scoring talent that they had last year. And obviously, both teams are going to be up for this game. It's one of the more underrated rivalries that we obviously understand as students at the U. But I'm not actually horribly biased. I've said it before. I'm a Stanford fan, so this one is not a biased pick. I think that Utah wins because Rylan Jones is a really good point guard, and then Timmy Allen, Brandon Carlson, and now they have a Swedish freshman named Pelle Larsson that's really adding to the team, as well as Alfonso Plummer's shooting. I think they're just more well-rounded. They have more of an interior presence than BYU does this year after losing Yoli Childs. So I think Utah's going to win this game. I certainly wouldn't be surprised if BYU does, though.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an awesome matchup. Last year it took place in the Huntsman Center. It's one of the better environments in the Huntsman Center in recent memory, in my opinion. And Utah was able to pull out the win. I think a huge part of that was the fans and that atmosphere inside the Huntsman Center. And so now this year, the games at BYU, they're not going to have that necessarily. And so an interesting dynamic there to add into this. I'm going to go Utah as well. And I'm very invested in this Utah front court. I think it's so much better than it was a year before, and they're the exact same players. It's Rylan Jones, it's Alfonso Plummer, and it's Timmy Allen. If I were to have a knack on the Utah front court, it is Timmy Allen. He's not the same aggressive player so far this year as he was last year, and so I'm gonna really look to see him make another impact in this game and step up a little bit, because so far it's been Rylan Jones and Alfonso Plummer in particular carrying the load of the scoring for this Utah team. So expect Timmy Allen to have a much better game, and I'll roll with the Utes with because last year they were all freshmen, 11 freshmen. Now they're sophomores. They're building chemistry. They're building experience. I'm going to go with Utah, and with BYU losing their best three players, I'll roll with the Utes in this one. Again, totally, I swear to God, I do not care that it's BYU. It's completely unbiased. It's just the fact that I quite frankly think that the Utah front court is going to make a difference in this one. With that being said, let's talk about Marquette at UCLA. Who you got in this matchup?
I think I'm going to go with UCLA because they got Johnny Juzang back, a Kentucky transfer who adds a lot of spacing for this team. Also just contributes to better depth, which earlier in the season they were missing some pieces. I trust Mick Cronin to get his guys into really, really good down the road. I really think that they could win the Pac-12 conference again this year after last year finishing second. But they if you took away the first part of the season, they were the best team for the last 15 games of the Pac-12 season. And I think he'll get his team there again, and then added depth and just a pure scorer is what they were lacking earlier in this season. And adding him back, it will really help. So I'm going UCLA. I like what Steve Wojciechowski at Marquette's doing, though. I love DJ Carton, their point guard, and Dawson Garcia is a really interesting freshman. But I'm going to go with UCLA. It's also at Pauley Pavilion and just the comfort of home floor. Maybe they're wearing the Jordan shoes. Maybe they're not. I think they're going to come out juiced regardless. So I got the Bruins.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Bruins as well, just at home over Marquette in this one. I think UCLA is going to roll in this one. I do think they're one of the better teams in the Pac-12, like you touched on. So I'll roll with the Bruins as well. All right, Florida at Florida State. Who you got in this one?
This is a really, really hard one because Florida State's only played 2 games, but they were able to beat a quality Indiana team in overtime, and I think they're only going to get better. Mike White at Florida, I was hypercritical of last year. He played way too slow for the team he had, and I think he's learned from his mistake and is playing quicker. But I think playing quickly goes into the Seminoles' hands. So I'm going to go with the Seminoles. I think that They got through a really tough Indiana team. They'll be able to score more easily against Florida, who is not quite as stingy on that end of the ball. And their defense will irritate the Gators, who have been kind of rolling along. But this is a rivalry game again. It's one of those things that it could go either way. And Florida certainly has the talent in Keontae Johnson, Noah Locke, Trey Mann to push the Seminoles. And because they've played more games, I think it's very possible. But I'm going to go with the Seminoles at home. I love Coach Hamilton. I think Coach Hamilton's going to bring me home.
Yeah, I'm going to go Florida State as well, primarily because I picked Indiana over Florida State in that matchup that you touched on, and that didn't work out so well for me. It's a great game, but Indiana wasn't able to pull it out. So I'll flip the script and roll with the Seminoles in this one over Florida to get a win for me there. Penn State at Michigan.
Penn State's been a surprise. I think they're one of the more surprising teams so far this season. They started playing better last year, but they lost Lamar Stevens. So the question was who was going to be there. Seth Lundy's been really good. But that said, I think I'm still going with Juwan Howard in Michigan. It's a home game for Michigan. Isaiah Livers and Franz Wagner are two of the best wings in the country. And I think the big and guard play surrounding them is only getting better. Hunter Dickinson, the center for Michigan's won Big Ten Freshman of the Week twice in a row now. And then Mike Smith, the guard from Columbia, and Eli Brooks, who are kind of both manning the backcourt. I think they'll pull it together, and they're a slightly better team. But Penn State, I really think, is another team in the Big Ten that's just so loaded they can make the tournament, even though they were supposed to have a down year this year.
Yeah, I think these are two probably of the more underrated teams in the Big Ten, in my opinion, both Michigan and Penn State. Excuse me. I'm going to go Michigan as well in this game. I just think they have more on the offensive side of the ball. Penn State's been streaky. They blew a 19-point lead against Seton Hall. But then they just went out and beat the number 15 team in the country by 20. So you're not going to necessarily they go on these runs and these lulls of what kind of performance they're having, even in mid-game. Like they'll be playing great and then they'll just not be able to score. And they've shown some bad streaks of shooting bad shots down the stretch and kind of leaving your head scratched and be like, what the heck are you doing? So I'm going to go Michigan and their experience in this game. I do think this is a massive game in the Big Ten, though, because these are two underrated teams. You're never going to know what the seeding is going to be for tournaments and things like that. And so these are big games. And I think whoever can win this has a big leg up in that aspect of things and can start trying to prove their legitimacy, I guess, is what I'm trying to say in this loaded Big Ten.
And one important thing to add is this is conference play. So this game isn't really an exhibition for these guys. This matters. So expect the best from both teams and certainly effort-wise at least.
Yep, first Big Ten game for both teams in this one. Notre Dame traveling to Kentucky. Who you got in this one, with Kentucky kind of not being the team we thought they were, and Notre Dame also showing some of those signs?
Oh, man, it is a really tough one because typically – both teams are pretty good. Obviously, Kentucky usually is really good. The lack of practice is really hurting Kentucky, but I just don't think a Kentucky team can fall to 1-4. I just don't think they can fall to 1-4. This is on their home court. Notre Dame's not exactly been very good either. They played a pretty good Ohio State team, very close, but they have obvious deficiencies defensively, which is what Kentucky wants to see because their deficiencies are are on the offensive side of the ball. Excuse me. And I just think that Kentucky will pull it together, that they have too many really good basketball players to not pull it together. I do think that Prentice Hub, the guard for Notre Dame, might be the best player on the floor, though, in this game. But I'm going to go with the Wildcats.
Yeah, I'm going to go Kentucky as well. And I think it's actually going to be, for a weird reason, but it makes sense in my head, and it's basically the expectation is going to play in their favor in this game. Is they have so much to play for because they're expected of so many people expect so much from them, and to start 1-3, they're feeling pressure now. So they're going to come out and have a good performance. I think they beat this Notre Dame team and move to at least 2-3 on the year so far. So I think they have a lot to play for. There's a lot of people grumbling in that camp as why are we 1-3, even though they've played a lot of very good teams. But with that being said, I'll take Kentucky in this one just to have a better performance, a more complete and cohesive performance, if you will. Stanford traveling to USC. Who you got in this one?
I mentioned I'm a Stanford fan, but I picked against them in this and in football. So My honest assessment is that they've played better competition than USC so far and are one of the better defensive teams in the country. They're top 10 in defensive efficiency, according to Ken Palm. So I'm going to go with Stanford. I think that they're going to be able to play their game. They're going to slow down USC. They've got the ability to play bigs. They played North Carolina already, and they played Trace Jackson Davis, who actually destroyed them. So I think they'll be equipped to play Evan Mobley, and I think that the added intensity of conference play will help Stanford because they're a more veteran-laden team than that of USC. So I'm going to go with Stanford. I hope I'm right on this one for sure. But this will be a really good game, and obviously conference play, like we mentioned, so really important in the grand scheme of things as well.
Yeah, a big Pac-12 matchup for sure. I just saw this USC team kind of boat race BYU earlier in the year. Granted, it was an early game for both teams, and I personally think Utah can hang with USC. So I'm going to take USC in this one. I just think they're a complete team. I'm still not sold on Stanford yet. You haven't told me enough to get me to buy in. But with that being said, I'm just going to take the athleticism of the Trojans in this one over Stanford, and we'll see. That's another one where I can just say, hey, I'm going opposite you just to see what happens. Maybe you get another game up on me. You got some on the earlier ones. All right, we've now moved to the games of the week for this week. So let's start things off with number 19 Richmond at number 11 West Virginia. Who you got in this one?
Oh, I was hoping you'd start with the other one, but
gotta save the best for last, my guy.
Oh, fair enough. I really want to take Richmond, but I think I'm going to go with West Virginia. I think that West Virginia has an elite combination of defensive ability and rebounding, and I don't think Richmond will be able to compete as well on the glass as they could against a team like Kentucky, where they're going to make mistakes horrible turnovers, which was allow Richmond to get looks in transition. I don't think that West Virginia will give you those looks in transition, and they're going to make your life really uncomfortable. I've seen a T-shirt floating around that says playing West Virginia is as bad as a weekend at the in-laws. So I think that encapsulates it. I think this will be a really good game. I love Chris Mooney, coach of Richmond. I love the Spider team. I just think that West Virginia has a better combination of players than they have in years past, and they're maturing. All their players have played from last season, and Richmond won't be able to force as many turnovers as they did against a really young Kentucky team. So I'm going to go with Western Virginia 72 to 68.
Close one. It's going to be a squeaker in Leaf size. So I agree. I like your analysis. I think Richmond is definitely a legitimate contender, but I just think West Virginia has the athletes and they play enough defense to be able to contain this Richmond team. I'm going to go West Virginia as well in this one by a score of 78-68. I just think that defense creates that gap a little bit more. We've touched on that Richmond surprised us in the past, so it's very, very possible that they come out and shock us in this one and pull off this upset. Nevertheless, I think these are two very legitimate top 20 basketball teams, and I think West Virginia gets it done in this one. And now, without further ado, let's move on to number 13, Texas, taking on number 2, Baylor. Who you got in this one? I know this one's an easier pick for you.
I got Baylor. I love the way they're playing right now. I think that their defense is going to limit Texas more than Texas's will limit Baylor. So I've got Baylor by about 10. I think it'll be about 72-62. And I think they'll be firmly in control. I don't think it'll be too close at the end, but Texas can surprise. They played really well in the Maui Invitational, and they have the ability to do so, but I just trust Baylor more at this point. So 72-62, Baylor.
Yeah, I'm going to go Baylor as well, but watch out for this one. I mean, we're both high on Texas. I just think Baylor's played a lot of big games already, at least slated for big games. I mean, you have to – it's something to go through to have the hype built up around that Gonzaga matchup and then not happen and have your next game scheduled against this Texas team who's freaky athletic. So, I mean, just watch out for this one. I'm not saying Texas is going to win, so I'm going Baylor, but I'm going to go with like 75-70. I think it's more competitive than a lot of people think it will be, and I just think Texas is going to be able to go back to their roots a little bit and try and drive the ball in on this Baylor team. I know it's hard, but that's going to be the recipe for success, is to be able to score off the bounce. So if Texas sits back and tries to win this game by 3-point shooting, it's going to be ugly, and I think Baylor is going to win handily. So I'll go Baylor for sure in this one, 75-70.
I like it.
All right, that's going to do it for Leif and I on this Friday basketball episode. We got football for you tomorrow. Well, football is happening tomorrow, and these basketball games, so some good stuff for you to watch this weekend. With that being said, we'll be back with you on Sunday to recap the football and provide some further updates on who's playing in conference championships, because they will all be locked after this weekend. And then with that being said, that'll be Sunday, and then Monday we're back with you with basketball. So Sunday and Monday episodes coming for you, and we will see you all on Sunday afternoon.
I will see you soon.